A teenager collapses in the middle of training under the incredulous gaze of her classmates. For 9 long minutes, her heart stops beating. For the doctors, it was just a serious episode. But for her, those minutes were the opening of an invisible door, a step into a place where every breath, every gesture shapes the fate of the entire earth. There she saw a scene that few could bear. A man, a signature, and then the tremor that changed everything. Stay, listen, because what she discovered there might also have something to do with you. My name is Maya. I'm 16 years old and I live in Mexico City, in an ordinary neighborhood where the honking of horns and the cries of street vendors are part of the daily soundscape. Until that summer, my life could be summed up in 3 things: Mum, my little brother, and athletics. My mum works as a nurse in a public hospital. Her hands are tired, but her smile always calms me. My younger brother, Diego, is 9 years old. He's curious, a bit clingy at times, but he's my shadow and also my light. I hardly see my dad. He's lived in another city for years. I'm not very religious. I respect those who are, but I've always trusted more in logic, facts, evidence, the tangible. I run because I know my legs respond, not because I feel some strange destiny commands me to. Or so I thought. 3 weeks before the accident, it all began with a dream. At first, I didn't think much of it. I dreamed of a dry, cracked ground like it had been scorched by an unforgiving sun. But suddenly, that ground opened, not like a crack, but like a book. The pages were made of stone, and each one had the symbols I had never seen. Every time I tried to read them, a hot wind slammed the book shut as if something was warning me. Not yet. I woke up with my heart racing, drenched in sweat, but I forgot about it, until I dreamed the same thing the next night, and again, 2 weeks before the accident. I was in history class, sitting in the 3rd row, when I felt a vibration beneath my feet. First very soft, then clearer. It was like a heartbeat, as if the ground had a heart. I leaned toward my best friend Valeria. "Do you hear that?" She looked at me confused. "Hear what?" I didn't say anything else, but that pulse was still there, steady, like a clock ticking just for me. From that day on, I felt it several times. In the schoolyard, in my room, even walking to the market. It wasn't an earthquake. I know what tremors feel like. This was something else. 1 week before the accident, that afternoon the sky was grey and the air felt heavy. I was training again when I passed by a small puddle left by the rain. Nothing special, but something shimmered there. It wasn't sunlight. The sun wasn't out. It was a golden flash, like the light came from the very bottom of the water. I stopped, crouching to see better, but as soon as I moved my head it vanished, like it had never been there. I walked home with a strange feeling, like I'd received a sign but didn't yet understand what it meant. The night before the accident may have just been my imagination, but I felt like my footsteps had changed. Every time I walked, I heard an echo that didn't come from the street or the buildings. It came from somewhere else. Even with the noise of traffic, my steps echoed like I was walking in a huge, empty hall. I started walking slower, listening. Something invisible walked with me, and I didn't know whether that gave me peace or fear. That night, I dreamed again of the ground opening like a book. But this time, a hand appeared. Large, strong, it turned a page. I didn't see its face, only the shadow of its profile and the metallic gleam of a pen ready to sign. Day of the accident. It was July 5th, 2025. A date that until then meant nothing special but would split my life in 2. That day, I was competing in an inter-school athletics competition. The air was dense, moist, almost suffocating. The smell of hot asphalt mixed with the energy drinks opened in the hands of the other runners. I had warmed up as usual, focused on my breathing, on the right tension in my muscles. But as I approached the starting line, I felt something strange in my chest. It wasn't pain, it was heat, a slow heat, like something inside me was lighting up, ready to consume me from within. The whistle blew. I ran, but halfway through, a sudden vertigo made me lose control. My legs buckled. The world began to distort around me. The crowd's screams faded, like I was hearing them underwater. And then nothing. Total darkness, absolute silence. Later they told me my heart stopped for 9 minutes. But at that moment, I didn't know I was crossing an invisible border, a threshold that would take me further than I ever imagined. I don't remember if I closed my eyes or if it was the world that went dark. The sound stretched like warm honey, becoming slow, heavy, almost painful to hear. The colours began to melt. The blue of the sky dripped onto the ground. The green of the grass slid along the white lines of the track. I felt my skin dissolve into a pale light, like a thin membrane between me and the air, until that membrane also disappeared. I no longer felt my body, only my consciousness. An instant later, or perhaps centuries, I couldn't say, I found myself in a place unlike anything I'd ever known. Before me rose a gigantic amphitheatre, carved in living stone, and I could feel it breathing, pulsing slowly, deeply as if it had its own heart. Everything was suspended in a sky of incandescent copper, like a sunset frozen in time. Each tier was occupied, but not by humans. They were slender, translucent beings, but with a strange density. Their bodies looked drawn in ink on crumpled paper. On their chests, each carried an inverted hourglass. The grains rose instead of falling, and every time one reached the top, it shone like a star and vanished. They observed me, not with eyes, but with their hourglasses. I felt like the very dust of those sands was judging me. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. Then one of them stood and pointed to a dark hallway behind me. He didn't speak, but his gesture said everything. I had to enter. The hallway opened into an even stranger vision, a river of black ink in constant motion, over which burning scrolls floated. The flames didn't burn the paper, they lit it. Every time I tried to read one, the letters twisted, changed shape as if they were alive. From that river rose a murmur, hundreds of voices speaking at once. Some prayed, others shouted commands, others begged. I don't know how, but I knew the name of that place, the Passage of Living Ink. In the centre of that river was a narrow bridge, and on the other side he was there, Jesus, but not the one from holy cards or churches. His hair was silver, like it was woven from ancient moonlight. His tunic was ashen, without ornament. His face was a perfect mix of sternness and tenderness, and his eyes didn't shine, but seemed to contain the whole abyss. He didn't smile, didn't extend a hand. He only spoke, and his voice pierced the air, the water, and my thoughts. The decrees of the earth write the fate of nations in a language few understand. I didn't understand. Then he raised his hand. The river of ink stopped. The flames froze. Space broke. We were no longer there. In front of me stood Donald Trump, behind a translucent lectern engraved with symbols I could only read if I blinked. In his hand, a golden pen, and beneath it, a golden scroll. Every time he moved his wrist, a line appeared on the decree, and instantly, a crack appeared somewhere on Earth. I saw the planet from above, like a crystal globe suspended in nothingness. The cracks expanded like frozen lightning, cutting through continents, dividing seas. And then, the Earth trembled. The continents shattered like broken plates, and I saw crowds in cities across the United States. They weren't protests. They were endless lines outside closed buildings, locked windows, hospitals with no access, drinking water stations with rusted locks. People were crying, arguing, collapsing from exhaustion. Mothers with children, lonely elders, worn-out workers. And each time the golden pen touched the decree, a new region of the world descended into chaos. But Trump didn't seem to see it. He didn't react. His eyes remained fixed on the text, as if the rest of the world didn't exist, as if his only mission was to write, no matter the consequences. I tried to scream. I wanted to warn him. But a voice stronger than mine spoke first. It was the same voice I'd heard in my dreams, the one that seemed to come from inside my bones. One single decision can trigger the earthquake. The words struck me like lightning. I looked at Jesus. He hadn't spoken them, but I knew they came from him. In his eyes, I saw something impossible to describe. The sorrow of someone who sees the inevitable coming, and the resolve of someone who knows they cannot intervene, that the choice belongs to humanity. And then, everything began to collapse. The copper sky shattered like old glass. The river of ink folded in on itself. The sands in the hourglasses on the beings' chests fell, all at once. I fell first slowly, like floating. But I didn't fall into water. It was dust. Bright dust. Every particle carried the weight of a memory, of a decision I had once made. I felt like I was leaving something bigger than my own body, as if I had lived in a place where the soul expands. And then, the impact. My eyes opened with a brutal jolt. White light, screams, hands shaking my shoulders, the smell of disinfectant, an oxygen mask pressed over my face. I was back, but something in me was not the same. The light in the room hurt me. Every ray felt like it pierced my pupils. I had a dry mouth and at the same time a metallic taste, as if I had bitten into electricity. My muscles were tense, as if they had been trapped in a shape they no longer remembered how to undo. Someone spoke to me gently, but before I heard the words, I heard something else, a light, distant vibration, like a drum buried in the ground. I thought it was my heart still trembling, but no, the vibration came from outside. The next day, when I was able to get up, I discovered something else, a strange ability. I could feel in my feet the footsteps of the nurses in the hallway, even through the walls. Each step was a note, a unique resonance. I could tell if someone was tired or in a hurry just by the vibration of their walk. That night, I started to draw. I didn't decide to, my hands just moved on their own. The first sheet, the amphitheatre, the seats carved in living stone, the copper sky, the silhouettes with inverted clocks. The second, the river of black ink, the burning scrolls, the voices trapped in the fire. The third, the golden decree, the translucent lectern, and upon it the world breaking under the written lines. My mother came in while I was finishing the last one. She remained silent. Then she told me without emotion, "You should rest. Your brain is trying to understand what you lived through." I didn't respond, I just nodded. But inside I knew it wasn't imagination. Days later, I went for a walk in a park near the hospital. The air was warm. I needed that silence. On a bench, an older man, round glasses, a pile of books beside him, looked like a professor or a researcher. He looked at me and asked, "Are you the young woman who collapsed during the competition?" I nodded. Then he lowered his voice as if sharing a secret. "What you saw resembles a very old story. They call it the Golden Order." I listened without moving. He explained that it was about an ancient pre-Columbian legend passed down by certain indigenous communities in Mexico and Paraguay. It spoke of a small group of men capable, through a single act of sacred writing, of provoking disturbances in the earth. According to the legend, they wrote on a golden scroll that bound their will to the very heart of the world. The effects were immediate. Earthquakes, droughts, the collapse of kingdoms. I got chills. That old man didn't know the details of my story. and yet he described with unsettling precision what I had seen in that other world. That encounter left a mark on me. What I believed had been a purely personal spiritual vision could be the resonance of an ancestral truth rooted in the collective memory of many peoples. I began to research. I found fragments of articles, old notebooks, mentions of golden letters, fatal signatures, decrees that made the earth tremble. Nothing concrete, but enough to sense an invisible thread linking my experience to human history. Little by little, a realization hit me hard. My near-death experience was not just a warning for me, it was a code, a symbolic language showing how certain political decisions, disguised as technicalities and administrative procedures, could alter the very balance of life on Earth. My family didn't want to hear any of it. My mother repeated that it was stress, trauma, fever. My little brother thought it was cool, but believed I was making it all up. I didn't blame them, but their rejection isolated me even more. So, I made a decision. I opened a notebook and began to write every detail, every image, every phrase that Jesus had spoken. I added my new sensations, my perceptions of the ground, the dreams I had since the accident. I wanted to record everything because I felt like time was running out. Then came the hardest part, speaking. I started slowly with a few trusted friends. Some listened with fascination, others laughed. The mockery hurt, but not enough to silence me. Later, I contacted a local journalist, thinking he might help me tell what I had lived. He agreed to an interview, but when I mentioned the name of a political leader, his tone changed. You know, that kind of thing can get you into trouble. Maybe, but at that moment I understood that my silence could be even more dangerous. My message is not religious. It's not about preaching a faith or converting anyone. It's a warning. The decisions that seem far from our lives, the ones signed in offices thousands of kilometers away, can have direct, brutal, and irreversible consequences on our day-to-day life. My near-death experience showed me this as earthquakes, broken continents. But in our reality, that translates into closed hospitals, shortages, entire cities abandoned. So yes, I will speak, even if they call me crazy, even if some close their eyes, because what I saw, what I heard, might be just the shadow of an event already in motion. And if that shadow keeps advancing, it will cover us all. In most near-death experience, accounts a known pattern is usually repeated. A sensation of floating, a bright light, a tunnel that opens, and finally the encounter with luminous beings that transmit peace and comfort. The message they bring is almost always universal: love, forgive, live fully. Maya also felt that disconnection, that instant when one leaves behind the weight of the body. She also encountered a figure that could be associated with Jesus. And yes, she also had a vision of what could be the future. But everything else, the place, the sensations, the very language of her experience, broke completely with usual testimonies. There were no flowery fields or transparent rivers. The place she described was of stone, as if she had entered an ancient tribunal, sculpted directly in the matter of destiny. The walls vibrated softly, as if each held the decisions made over the centuries. The creatures that inhabited that place were not luminous angels, but tall, slender beings, with inverted hourglasses embedded in their chests. They were symbols never before reported. It was as if time in that world moved backwards, reminding that every human decision always returns to the one who makes it. Jesus was not like he is commonly depicted. He had no halo, nor did he emit blinding light. He wore an ash-grey robe. His hair was silver, his gaze stern, almost sad. He spoke little, but each word carried the weight of a sentence. The most disconcerting part was the direct vision of a terrestrial political leader, Donald Trump, signing a golden decree. Each stroke of his pen caused a crack that spread across the Earth's surface, triggering cataclysms, broken continents, cities without water, crowds in chaos. Never before had a near-death experience so clearly linked a specific political act to a global physical transformation. The message was not just spiritual, it was a direct warning. The decisions made in the halls of power can affect the planet's balance immediately and brutally. That is why this experience goes beyond personal testimony. It places politics and the divine on the same stage of judgment. It tells us that what we believe, distant and abstract, may actually be the invisible epicenter of an earthquake. Maya did not return with a message of comfort. She came back with a heavy burden, a warning that surpasses her age, her experiences, and perhaps even her understanding. Over there, in that other world, she saw what few dare to imagine, that a single gesture, a simple signature, can change the fate of the entire planet. She did not speak from fear. She spoke from responsibility, because she understood that the real danger does not lie in the earthquakes, but in the silent decisions that provoke them. And you, if you knew that a signature could alter the future of humanity, would you have the courage to say it? Or would you choose to remain silent?